weeks, it'll be here. Oh. All right, my talk today, freedom thinking. Because when we have freedom in our thoughts, that's what allows us to choose the next best action. When we have freedom in our thoughts, we get off of autopilot. It's when we're on autopilot, we don't have freedom because, we may think we do, but when we're on autopilot, we just react the same old way. Dave, could I get you to move the iPad? It kind of flopped over. Yeah, when we're on autopilot, we just react how we're used to reacting. We feel like a victim, or we get, bent out of shape. So that's not freedom right there. So I've been doing a deep dive into the Ten Commandments because there is a lot of deep wisdom in there. There's the surface level of the Ten Commandments, but then you go a lot deeper, and there's so much more. There's so much more. Moses actually ushered in a brand new age of spiritual revelation when he received the Ten Commandments. Because the Ten Commandments were the first thing that revealed our connection, right? How we are in communion with God, right? It's the first time humanity ever started thinking about their relationship with the divine. And so the Ten Commandments changed the course of history for us. Now, last week I talked about the first commandment, and so today I'm going to talk about the second and third, because they all go together so well. And if we're breaking one of them, we're breaking all of them. So the first commandment is, you shall look to, thou shalt have no other God before me. That's the first commandment. And then to go deeper in that, we look to do we have another source for our good? Are we looking out there? Like, are we looking to a job or a person to bring us our good? Are we looking to God only? Are we looking to God? Are we having faith in God? So thou shalt have no other source but God for your supply. And this is about trusting in God for all of our good. When we put the responsibility for our well-being on something outside of us, okay, like a job, like a person, like our government, all of those things are changeable. All of those things could fall apart. Now, of course, a job, if we're doing a job, we should get paid for that job. But if we give all of our power of happiness to the job, if we lose that job, do we just lose our ability to be happy and have well-being in our life? So if we're thinking there's something outside of us that's responsible for our good, when it goes away, that means so does our good. So does our good. So we look to God only. We look to God as the source of our supply. And that means that everything is a potential channel for our good to come through. This is where we get the ideas and the inspiration to try applying for a job someplace else, for example. But if we're looking to another source, if we lose that source, then what we might say is, well, geez, now I lost my job, and I really liked that job, and I was making good money there, and it was really easy. Now what am I going to do to have money? But if we're looking to God as the source of our supply, then we can think, all right, bring it on. Spirit of truth in me, reveal what I need to know today. Show me the way. I know there's that within me, and it knows how to do what I need to do. It knows how to find me a new job. It knows how to handle everything. It knows what to do, and it will compel me to act on what it knows. So that leads us now into the second commandment, because if we are already looking to something else as the source of our supply, we're already breaking the second commandment, which is, you shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not make for yourself an idol. In the story of the Ten Commandments, we saw this play out when the Hebrew people became really desperate and frustrated. They had been rescued from Egypt. Moses came and brought them out of Egypt. They went through miracle after miracle, but then they hit this point in time where things were not working out. They felt stuck. Moses had gone up this mountain and wasn't coming back. They lost faith. And so they built a golden calf, or they created a golden calf. And they were hoping maybe the calf would tell them what to do. Okay? But they did this out of desperation and because they lost faith, because nothing was moving. Nothing was moving in their life. Metaphysically, this commandment is about, you shall make no mental image of lack. You shall make no mental image of lack. We are not here to create and serve false idols. We are not here to create and serve false ideas. False ideas. Every thought of fear, of poverty, of sickness, of worry, of doubt, that's a false image. It's a false image. Now, it's true the condition may be present, but we don't have to give our power to a condition. We don't give our power to that, right? We go within, right? We line up with the divine within us. So it only becomes an idol outside of ourselves or an idol outside of God when we give it power. Because God is all things, there's nothing that can take its place. There's nothing that can have more power. So God is all things. When we focus on the wonder that is God, instead of looking at conditions and thinking, well, this is going to limit me, I'm going to be in lack, and I'm going to be in so much trouble, and I don't know how I'm going to get through this. We stop looking at the condition, and instead we focus on the wonder that is God. When we focus on the wonder that is God, we call forth the treasures that this life has to offer. And we call forth those treasures in ways we didn't imagine. Like, that's how we know we're really surrendering to Spirit, is things start working out for us in ways we hadn't imagined they would be working out for us. It's a loss of faith that leads to the mental image of lack. And I know for myself, I always thought, because I'm so spiritual, that's what I thought, I'm so spiritual, and I have faith here and here, here, that means I'm covered, right? That's what I thought. I'm covered, even though maybe here I didn't have so much faith. But I thought mostly because I'm spiritual and I carry my crystals and say my affirmations, I was okay. But if we lack faith in even one area of our life, we lack faith. We just lack faith. Now this is the commandment where we hear about God being a jealous God. Right? But we know God's not jealous because God's not a man. God's not a man outside of us, okay? Substitute the word jealous for the word exacting. God is an exacting God, right? We are created in the image and likeness of our Creator. We are beloved, right? We are expressions of love, and we have love working through us and out into our lives. But it's not going to force us to be like the image that we were created in. It's not going to force us to do that. So when we move into a loss of faith and we start focusing on lack and limitation, we're the one causing the suffering. God's not causing the suffering. But that's spiritual law. If you lack faith and you start focusing on lack and limitation, you're going to start feeling miserable. Okay, so this is what it means that God is an exacting God. If we lack faith anywhere, in any part of our life, we will start struggling. We'll experience the unhappiness and the doubt and the worry that comes with the loss of faith. You know how we can go into a train of thought? Okay, this is another example of how God is an exacting God. We get caught in this train of thought of limitation. Like, I love the train of thought that comes around every year in October or so, right? And it was really a normal train of thought before we had the COVID hit last year or 2 years ago. But like every fall, it's like, oh, it's flu season. Here it comes. Here it comes. I'm probably going to get it, I'm probably going to get it. And when I get sick, I'm going to miss a lot of work. And then, I've got so much to do. If I miss work, all this stuff's not going to get done. So I'm going to work harder right now. I'm going to put in some overtime. So for when I get sick, right? This is where this train of thought takes us. God is an exacting God. We start focusing on lack and limitation, and we get more lack and limitation to focus on. So God is a jealous God, and this means do not take your eyes off the wonders that are God, or you'll spiral into that lack and limitation thinking, right? And that, like worrying about the colds or flus, what does that ever lead to? Does it lead to happiness? Or does it lead to vitality? Now, it doesn't mean we ignore the condition. I mean, we can be sensible. It's like, well, okay, sure, it's cold and flu season. I'll wash my hands. I'll be careful. Like that, I'll wash up. Okay, but we don't have to start fretting about it and giving all of our attention to it. In the Matthew chapter 7, verse 16 and 17, Jesus says, Are grapes gathered from thorns? Are figs gathered from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. The bad tree is when somebody is walking around judging the conditions in their life, and they're worrying, and they're doubting, and they're fearing, and they're resenting, and it's creating more fear, doubt, worry, resentment, more things in the conditions of their life that freak them out. The good tree is when a person walks by faith and focuses on the wonders that are God and calls forth those treasures into their life. Any idea that we hold in our thoughts and our feelings must eventually take form in our lives. This is why it is so important not to make a mental image of lack. Don't even think about lack. Focus on the wonders that are God. Now, if we make a mental image of lack, this naturally leads into breaking the third commandment. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God. Now, I grew up with the King James Version of the Bible and heard this as, you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. Now, as a kid, I heard it's all about don't cuss, don't use any cuss words with the word God. Don't use any cuss words. Like, you can cuss, but don't put the word God in there, right? But actually, this is about treating the sacred with contempt. When we take the Lord's name in vain, or we make wrongful use of the name, we are treating the sacred with contempt. We are disrespecting that. We are being irreverent with the power that created worlds. We are being irreverent with that. So, at a deeper level, this is saying you shall not speak the word of lack or limitation. You shall not even speak it. Only focus on God. There's the first commandment. That's where you get everything in your life from. Don't make any mental image of lack, and certainly don't speak any words of lack, because that dishonors the power that works through us. Okay, when we speak those words of lack. Now, to really understand this, we want to consider the name that God gave Moses. When Moses said to God, all right, I will go to Egypt, I will do what you say to do, but when I get there, who do I tell them sent me? And God, as Spirit, revealed itself to Moses as pure being, said, you will say, I am has sent me to you. The I am is the name of the living Spirit. It's the invisible image and likeness of God that we are to make manifest into our lives. This is our purpose on this planet, to call forth that presence into anything that we do, into everything that we do. How we love, how we create, how we work, how we relate with others. We call that presence forth and into that. So when we're saying I am, we're claiming something. We are claiming something. So I was thinking about this week. What am I amming? What am I amming? Right? How's this, right? I am so sick of all this stuff. I'm sick of this. I'm worried about getting sick too, come to think of being sick of stuff, right? Oh, I'm worried about my family. And I'm tired of controversy and division. I'm tired of watching my carbs. Like so many things. I'm just fed up. Just fed up. In Matthew 12:36, Jesus says, on the day of judgment, you will have to give an account for every careless word you utter. A day of judgment is that moment when we're reaping what we have sown, right? How did we live our life that day? What were our thoughts and our words and our actions, right? What was all that? And we're in the effect, basically, of that. Right now, we're all in the effect of how we lived our morning and the choices we made this morning. Okay, so that's what that day of judgment is. It's being in the effects. So we're in the effects of choices well made, or we're in the effects of choices not well made. We're in the effects of a life well lived or a life not well lived. So we are I-amming all that. We're claiming it. And if we claim it, we create it. So what are we claiming? What are we claiming all day long? All of our words either affirm God's power and presence in our life, or they deny God's power and presence in our life. Every spoken word leads to an experience. And we're either feeling good about it or we're not. We're feeling down. Now, so what happens if we're continually talking about difficult situations? Well, we get on the difficult situation train. That's where we go. To difficult situation station, I guess. But if we're talking about our difficult situations and getting stuck in the conditions, again, I'm not saying don't ever talk about the bad things. Sometimes we have to talk about something. We have to accept it. And it's like, because where do I go from here? Like, if you get a flat tire, you're not like, oh, everything's fine. I'm just going to drive anyway. Well, actually, I did that when I had a flat tire not too long ago. I was like, oh, I'll just drive on it. Sometimes we do have to acknowledge challenges. So then we can figure out what are we doing next. What's open the door, Spirit? Reveal the way. Reveal the way. But if we're not looking to God as the source of our supply, then we make a mental image of lack. If we make a mental image of lack, then we start speaking words of lack. And I really believe this is why Jesus taught so much on the power of our words, our actions, and then the effects from all that. He really understood the proverb, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You know, Jesus, the Hebrew Bible, that was Jesus' Bible. That was everything he learned was in that Bible, the Hebrew Bible, what we would call the Old Testament. In Matthew 12:37, he said, by your words you will be justified, by your words you will be condemned. We're using our words every day, for good or for evil. Our words build up, our words tear down. Now, when we are walking in faith, when we see God as the source of our supply, we're walking in faith, and we're remembering then that we're designed to call forth the good. And when we remember how we're designed to call forth the good, the words we speak are hope and courage and abundance. But if we are walking by sight, if we're walking because we're looking at all the conditions in our life and fretting about all the conditions, then we're looking out there and not focusing on the wonders that are God. The words that we're speaking are, I'm worried about this thing, and this is just wrong, and this needs to change. Our words become lack and limitation. Now, luckily, this is something that we can change, and we're all capable of changing the way we think. We're capable of changing. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. But we always can look into our environment, like the effects that we're living in our environment will always guide us, like what do we need to change? Like, are we happy or are we fretting? Right? So just like you can look at your physical environment and see if you made a mistake and then fix the mistake. Like years ago I made this zucchini bread and I actually was pretty good at making zucchini bread. But I was making this bread and we were all out of oil. And you know, you put oil in bread. But I had heard you can substitute applesauce for oil. I'm like, I'm going to try that. But we didn't have any applesauce. So I thought, well, I got a lot of zucchini. And so I substituted zucchini for the applesauce, which was being substituted for the oil. Now I ended up baking this bread for like 3 times the length that it normally took. And the effects, it was not zucchini bread. The center portion was kind of like zucchini pudding, and it tasted okay. The kids still ate it. They dug it out, you know, the middle. The end was outside was kind of crusty. But I could look at the effects. It's like, this is not zucchini bread. I bought the proper ingredients. I remade another batch, and it came out like zucchini bread. We look at the effects. We look at the effects in our lives. How are we feeling in our lives right now? Whatever we are persistently holding in mind becomes our experience. I discovered this when I got into the complaint-free living program that started here back in 2007. We were all given a purple bracelet like this, and if you complain, you have to switch to the other wrist. The goal is to go 21 days without switching. The first time I did this, it took me 4 months. It took me 4 months, but I was persistent. But see, it was a really paradigm-shifting experience for me because all day long I was wrestling in my own consciousness. I was wrestling with my own thoughts. I wanted to complain. I was really sure it was going to feel good to complain, but wait, no, I want to do the right thing. I want to get through this, right? But I literally, it was a literal mental wrestling going on in my head. And so that is what happens when we decide, okay, I'm going to change my thinking. Like, we start wrestling with the other thoughts that want to take over. And like, it could look like, all right, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to just think really godly thoughts all day. God is all things. And that means me. And all the brilliant ideas. And, oh, yeah, I'm going to create, oh, there's a new strain of COVID? What? Oh, God, now I don't have to worry about that. Oh, the memes. Social media is going to drive me crazy for another year. Oh, wait, no, don't go there. God is all things. And that means me. There's this back and forth that's happening. And we've got to be so persistent. Now, when I was happily just complaining and not thinking about it, I was happy. I thought I was happy. Going through the process where I was changing my thinking, I was exhausted. So we do have to be persistent. Now, since 2007, for the next few years, I continually repeated the complaint-free program. And then finally I did it in 21 days. I started it, and I did it shortly after I started here, and I got through it in 21 days. Because the bracelet would always trigger me. And I was like, oh yeah, that's where I'm at. That is where I'm at. But you know what? We're wrestling in our own consciousness. And I was so happy to hear about this idea of we're wrestling in our own consciousness, because I finally get to talk about one of my favorite stories in the Bible, where Jacob was wrestling with the angel. All right? And you know, Jacob is among the big players in the Hebrew Bible. His grandfather was Abraham. His grandma was Sarah. And they were like big players in the Hebrew Bible. And so then they had, Abraham and Sarah had Isaac. Isaac married Rebekah. They had twin boys, Esau and Jacob. Now, Esau came out first. He was born first, so he's the older brother. In some versions of the Bible, it says he came out ruddy and covered in curly hair. And I imagined him as just this little Celtic warrior, actually, right? And like Cuchulainn or something. And then Jacob was born. And Esau was very into manly things right off the bat. He would go hunting. And Isaac favored Esau because he would go hunting and bring home game, fresh game for dinner every night, and made his dad very proud. Jacob liked to hang out at home with mom. And so Jacob became his mom's favorite. So Esau was daddy's favorite. Jacob was mom's favorite. Now there came a time when Isaac was going to give a blessing. I don't understand how this worked, but there's one blessing. I guess it's the big blessing. And one boy in the family gets it. Isaac was going to give it to Jacob. But Rebekah tricked Isaac into giving it. Isaac was going to give it to Esau. Rebekah wanted Jacob to have the blessing. She tricked her husband. He accidentally gave the blessing to Jacob. However, there's already contention between Esau and Jacob. Because even before that, Jacob managed to trick Esau out of his birthright. Now, I'm not sure what the birthright included, but I have a feeling it had something to do with inheritance. So now Jacob has this extra inheritance. He has the big blessing, and he decides to go and find a wife. Okay, so now he goes looking for a wife. So the story goes that he was traveling, and he goes to sleep one night. He lays down, and he puts his head on this rock, and he has a dream of a ladder, and the ladder goes to heaven, and the angels are descending and ascending up and down this ladder. Now, this dream represents the constant communion between God and humanity. So when Jacob woke up, that was the beginning of change in Jacob's life. Like something clicked, and suddenly now his consciousness starts shifting. So he travels, he meets Rachel, he falls in love with her, but Rachel's dad says, well, you have to work for me for 7 years, and then you can have Rachel as your wife. Jacob does that. But he's now tricked, and he ends up marrying Leah first. He's tricked into marrying the older sister. He does eventually get to marry Rachel, and they go on their way. He has a couple of concubines, and he starts his family. But what's interesting is that Jacob was the trickster. Jacob was the manipulator. But now that was happening to him, right? So now he's got his family, and then he hears about his brother Esau. Now Esau had threatened to kill him. Of course, Esau was really mad. And he hears now that Esau is coming for him. He's coming for him. But see, Jacob thinks about what happened, and he knows what he did was wrong. He's worried for his family. He's worried about his children, his wives. So he decides the right thing to do is to give Esau a payoff, basically, restitution. He wants to make restitution. So he sends somebody with all these riches for Esau. Then he moves his family to a place where he believes they'll be safe. And they go to sleep, and he just sits down, but this man appears, and Jacob starts wrestling with this man. It turns out to be an angel. So they wrestle, and they wrestle all through the night until the dawn. The angel finally pokes Jacob in the hip and cripples Jacob. But Jacob still hangs on and is demanding a blessing. So the angel finally says, all right, I'll give you the blessing. He tells Jacob he's earned it. He's actually earned this blessing. This is the first time Jacob earned anything. Okay? He earned an honest blessing. The angel says, your name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel, the Prince of God. For you have proved your strength through wrestling with an angel and with man, and you have prevailed. Jacob was wrestling with his lower consciousness as well as his higher. He was wrestling between actions that fail to honor the divine and the actions that he knew would honor the divine. Now, Esau finds Jacob, and they reunite. And it's when you read it in the story, it's beautiful. It's beautiful reuniting. Everything is forgiven. Now, everything is forgiven because Jacob is now a different man. Okay, before he was the trickster, he was the manipulator, he tricked his brother out of his birthright and his blessing. But see, at the time, Jacob never conceived how there's more than enough, like through God, that all things are possible. There's more than enough. And what I find interesting is he struggled with this, even though his grandparents were such big players. Like his grandparents lived a powerful story of what it means to move out of faith and into a life of having total faith. But still, Jacob struggled with this. Okay, he didn't ever get how he was even more than enough. When he dreamed of the ladder, that's when his own consciousness started to change. When he heard that Esau was coming for him, he knew it was time now to trust in the activity of the Lord working through him, to trust in how God, when God goes to work in our life, things out here start shifting too. He didn't think about manipulating Esau. He didn't think about tricking him. Right? He just did what he felt was the right thing to do. Then he got the blessing from the angel, and Jacob left behind his old identity, and he became free in his thinking because now he no longer had to manipulate. Jacob became Israel, and he was no longer in lack consciousness. He saw God as the source of his supply. He did not make a mental image of lack. He made a mental image of abundance. He did not make a mental image, or he didn't speak words of lack. He spoke words of abundance. Now, Esau represents physical vigor and consciousness directed by desire and appetite and earthly physical things. Jacob represents our ever-developing mentality and our growing consciousness of our ability to do something with our thoughts. We can actually take control of our thoughts. Now, their reconciliation was about harmony being established between the thinking mind and our body consciousness. We don't have to be controlled by our bodies. We do not have to be controlled by our fears. But we do have to wrestle with the angel, as we are changing our way of thinking. The struggle back and forth between these two ways of thinking, it can also be crippling. Jacob walked with a limp the rest of his life. Like a reminder, this is a lot of work, right? To just not go down that path of reaction. We're monitoring this. Like we're taking care of it. It takes effort to grow and to change. But we get that blessing from the angel, and then we can let the struggle go. So we have our first commandment. Look to no other source but God for our good. The second, make no mental image of lack. The third, don't speak the word of lack. We break one, we break them all. So we can change our thoughts and we can change our life. But I know sometimes I hear, well, it's like, oh, just change my thinking and just start talking positive, right? It's like, no, it's not about just being positive. It is about denying the existence of some condition outside of ourselves having all the power over us, right? You can get a flat tire and that doesn't have to ruin your life. Like the flat tire didn't ruin your day. You still get to choose, well, okay, what do I do next? Right? Do I call AAA? Do I just drive home on it? I wouldn't recommend that. Okay? So it's not just positive thinking, right? There's a lot of work. We're paying attention. Keep calling forth through God through us, for us, as us. God is all things, and that means me. I call that forth. There's that within me that knows what to do, how to do it, and it compels me to act on what it knows. When I was wrestling in my own consciousness to get to 21 days of complaint-free living, it was not positive thinking that got me there. It was persistence. It was persistence and paying attention. It's like, do I want to say this out loud? Really? So I got really good at catching it in here. So our call to action this week. I thought it would be fun. I'm going to do this, but we have an internal guidance system. It's really hard to pay attention to every single thought we have, but we always know how we feel. So how are we feeling? Do we feel good? Because if we're feeling good, it's very likely that the choices we've just been making honor the divine working through us. If we're not feeling good, if we're feeling fearful, or we're stuck in lack, or we're focusing on something out there that just feels wrong and it needs to change so we can be happy, chances are we're making choices that are not honoring the divine within us. We're making the mental image of lack. We're speaking the words of lack. So I have an affirmation for us. You go ahead and push the button, Mom. And this is kind of long, but I got it out of the book, The 10 Commandments of Prosperity, and I already wrote it in my planner for this next week. I have faith in the power of my word. I speak only that which I desire to see made manifest. Let's say that together. I have faith in the power of my word. I speak only that which I desire to see made manifest. When we are making the mental image of lack and we're speaking words of lack, it means we don't have faith in God. We're not looking to God as the source of our supply. And this is what creates hell on earth, right? This creates hell. If we look to no other source but God for our supply, for our good, and instead we're making the mental image of abundance. I'll move out of the way in a second. We'll do that. But if we're making the mental image of abundance, if we are speaking words of abundance, that is how we create heaven on earth. That is how we create heaven on earth. So until next time, remember, you are the activity of spirit walking around in a body. You are the heart and hands of God in this world, and everything you do, you are blessed, and so it is.
So it is. Amen.
Thanks. All right, well, we have a closing song for you, or a post-message song.